Hello everyone, my name is Chris and welcome back to my hobby blog. I'm excited today because I'm reviewing George R. Martin's Fevre Dream, which is a vampire story taking place in the late 1800s, mid to late 1800s or so. And I really enjoyed this book. If you don't know George R. Martin, he is the author of the very highly famous and probably one of my favorite series, A Song of Ice and Fire, that the TV show Game of Thrones adapted. A little bit. After book 3, they didn't really do anything with that. But aside from that, I've been hearing about this book for many years, ever since I started reading George R. Martin books. And this is the first non-Game of Thrones book that I've read by him. So I was going into it with some pretty high expectations, because I love George R. Martin's writing. And it was A Song of Ice and Fire. But I feel like his writing is definitely not up to the same level as A Song of Ice and Fire when reading this, because this book was written back in 1982, I believe, 84 maybe, and so it's about over a decade before A Game of Thrones, which is book 1 of that series. But this book, I think, is fantastic, but I think I've just been very much burned out of vampire books lately because, I don't know, I read Salem's Lot, I read, oh yeah, so I've read Dracula in the past, and I've seen the Nosferatu movies a lot of the Dracula movies as well, starring Christopher Lee, so I'm very familiar with the story of Dracula. And this is another twist on the Dracula story, except by George R. Martin. And I was really surprised by the lengths that George R. Martin went to, because there's a few points where the characters are realizing something, and they get caught up in a event relating to the vampires where they have no control. And all they can do is sort of be the observer of these really horrific events. And there was one event in particular about halfway through the book, maybe in the last half of the book or so, there was a really bloody scene that happened that I was not expecting. And I really sort of enjoyed that George R. Martin went to those lengths, because one of my issues with Salem's Lot was that the vampires were not scary enough. And I think the main vampire in this, and I won't really give any spoilers, this will be a fully non-spoiler review, because I don't really have many thoughts out in regards to the end or anything like that. I think the ending is very beautiful, but like aside from that, I don't really have any thoughts on it. But in regards to the villain of the story, I was really enjoying that storyline a lot. And I wish that George R. Martin had spent more time with the villain, because he is so iconic on the page. And the first time you meet him and meet his assistants and everyone who sort of allows the entire system that he's relying on to continue, all these characters were really fantastic, very memorable. Sour Billy, I think, was one that I was not expecting to enjoy reading as much as I did, because he is just a nasty, nasty character and just a really villainous guy. But you really start to understand him towards the end of the book, and the main villain, he's just really evil, and the characters sort of have this obligation to stop him. And I'm kind of like, okay, I get it. It's a vampire story. We got to have the big showdown with the vampire. But I was really hoping that we would get more unexpected conclusions, because everything in vampire media is pretty tropey, in my opinion. If you've read one vampire story, you've basically read them all, is sort of my thinking at this point as I continue this vampire theme this month. With Salem's Lot and a bunch of Dracula movies, Nosferatu, all of that. But this book in particular, I really enjoyed the atmosphere. And that's something that I think George R. Martin nails from the beginning in his career. And this is the only non-Game of Thrones book I've read, so I don't know how his other books are. But this one in particular had such a great atmosphere for the vampire story. he really knows how to write the climate, the sort of feelings that people are having. The main character is someone who I thought was really interesting, and I sort of wanted more agency on his part because he is sort of an observer through a lot of the story. And I really enjoy the character of Joshua York, who is one of the other kind of characters centered around the main storyline. And he is someone that the main character is sort of serving because he wants to buy a steamboat to go up and down the Mississippi and make money and sort of find other vampires, which is really cool. I really love that. But I was really wanting more from that storyline. I feel like George R. R. Martin is like on the edge of like a masterpiece because I think this story could have kept going. I feel like the story wrapped up a little too quickly, and there was even a time skip towards the end of the book of more than a decade where I was like, what happened in this entire decade span? Like, what happened? Like, there could have been more, and I think this is why George R. R. Martin strayed from the idea of a time skip in A Song of Ice and Fire, because if you don't know, after book 3, he was going to do a 5-year in-world time skip. And then as he started writing it, he realized, oh, all of this like is just flashbacks. I don't want to do flashbacks. And I think this book is a major reason why, because a lot of the characters sort of become stagnant and sort of are waiting around for the story to pick them back up. And all the side characters, they have really fulfilling, satisfying conclusions during this time skip, but the main characters are sort of twiddling their thumbs and sort of trying to find where the story is going to pick up next. And that was one thing I was really disappointed in with this book, but I think objectively this book is a 8.5 out of 10. 8 out of 10 is sort of where I'm feeling in regards to my personal opinions about the story and everything with that. But I was really, I don't know, I guess I went in with too many expectations. So that's sort of my fault in regards to that, but I've heard a lot of people say Fevre Dream's the favorite of George R. R. Martin's works, and I can definitely see why. I really enjoyed reading it. It wasn't a slow read for me. It was still a page turner. It's not as big of a page turner as A Song of Ice and Fire, but it is a page turner. It is bingeable, so if you're looking for like a final October book to read before Halloween comes on Friday, which is about 4 days from now, this is definitely the story for you because it has fantastic atmosphere. I really enjoyed that. George R. R. Martin is a very great, talented writer, and even from his early works with Fevre Dream, you can definitely see that. So it's definitely better than a lot of the books that I've read recently, aside from Insomnia. I think that was my favorite book of this month so far. I'll do a ranking at some point, maybe. But this was just a really great book. I wanted more out of it, but what I got, I'm very happy with. And again, the ending is really beautiful. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was worth the read. The book is short. It's only like 330 pages in my edition that I read, which is the paperback, but I would love to see like an adaptation of this, and I know George R. R. Martin is an adaptation fiend because he has tons of stories that he has written and edited through the wild cards and all his other stories that he's written. So I would love to see like him tackle Fevre Dream and try to sell that as like a movie or a mini series. I don't think it should be a full season TV show, because I don't feel like there's enough story to tell, unless they were really to flesh out the time skip and flesh out a lot of the points in the story where it felt like it was going way too fast. But I think aside from that, I don't really have any other thoughts about this book. I think this is a really great book, as I said, and just to wrap it up, this is a great book for October. So I think this would also be a really great summer horror book to read, because a lot of it takes place during the summer, and George R. R. Martin really paints a picture of this hot and sweltering summer to the reader that I think really vibes well with summer. So without further ado, thank you all so much for watching, and please have a great rest of the day.